Hi guys, welcome to another episode of PlanetScott.TV. I'm Scott, and as you can see, I'm in the Wild West. Why? Because I'm going to be talking about a brand new game called Gold Rush. This game is set with the background of the Wild West and the whole Gold Rush fever, and it's got trains, all the nerdy stuff, and that's going to be coming up on this episode of PlanetScott.TV. So I've got a really great guest, and his name is Dan Kitchen, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dan. Dan is a passionate gamer. He has been all of his life. He's credited with developing and producing over 240 commercially released titles, over 25 platforms. Now he's known for certain games like Crackpots, Ghostbusters, F-14 Tomcat, Crossbow, Double Dragon, Commando, River Raid 2, and Kung Fu Master. Well, I have him on the show because he's got this brand new game he's making, and I want you guys to welcome him. This is Dan Kitchen, so welcome, Dan.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on during this time. So I guess none of us have anything to do, so you said yes.
Yes, and I'm spending my days these days in the desert with the game and really plowing away, getting it wrapped up, getting it very fun and playable. So, love to take a break from that and speak to you.
Well, we're going to be talking about Activision first of all, because that was the place where you cut your programming chops as far as making your most popular games, right?
Yes. Activision is where I started with my brother Gary back in 1982.
And
we actually had a small development company before then where we did some work for the Apple II computers. And then in 1982, we and a few other guys joined Activision and opened their Eastern Design Center.
Now, back then, one of the most popular games was called Pitfall. So if you're not familiar with Activision whatsoever, Pitfall is one game that that really put you on the map. But I learned something. I learned that you were actually the model for Pitfall, Harry. And you can't say I'm wrong because I do have some proof. Okay, there you are. There you are. This is not. This is an actual demo cartridge that never was released. But yeah, I did a little close-up of you, and that was actually taken at Free Play Florida, right?
It was, but back in the 80s, I had to do that at the Activision office, and Dave was there with his graph paper and his pencil, trying to figure out how to make me look like a real blockhead and stick me somewhere in the cartridge. But that was at Free Play Florida this past year. They had set up a wonderful diorama that showed Pitfall with the alligators, and you were able to sit up on a little board there, hold the rope, and swing almost over the alligators. It was very cute.
Yeah, I had to show that to you. I know you didn't know that was coming, but I took that photo, and I thought it was perfect. So
that's great. And I just want to be clear, Pitfall put Activision on the map, and of course Dave Crane. We were fortunate enough to join just about the time Dave was releasing that game.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Hold on. There you go.
Yes, that is at Free Play Florida this past year. That's myself, Dave Crane in the middle, and my brother Gary on the other side.
Now, what's weird is that you and Gary are both programmers, both working for Activision, and both of you have made some really popular games in the past. He happened to have made one called Keystone Capers, and this is what Keystone, and there's a little picture of the two characters. There's, what's his name?
That's Keystone Kelly.
Okay, Keystone Kelly. And he's chasing?
Yes, it takes place in Southwick's department store. It was a real stroke of genius my brother had. He created a wonderful game where Keystone Kelly cop, is one of the Keystone cops, as it were, and he chases Harry Hooligan through the department store as Harry is trying to escape with some loot. And it did very well on the Atari when it was released in 1983, and it was one of the most popular games that we had done back then.
And so this is your brother's cartridge, and so it was what you have done is you decided that you were going to make your own video game based upon those characters, right?
Well, back at Activision in 1982, I had finished Crackpots, which had just been released, and then began working on my next game. And I always had a love of Western railroads and trains in general, so I wanted to put up a display on the Atari that was a railroad car, and eventually turned into a train, and wanted to do a little game with a man running around the top of it. And Gary at the time suggested I use Keystone Kelly, which I had done, and was hoping to do a sequel of Gary's Keystone Capers.
Now, back then, creating a game was, I would think it would be a lot more difficult because you had slower computing power. And can you tell me a little bit about what you used back then to actually create the games?
Sure. Before we had joined Activision, Gary had back engineered the Atari, and had written Space Jockey for US Games, and then he wrote Donkey Kong for Coleco. To do this, he had designed a 4K board that would slip into an Apple II computer. And so we literally had to develop our own tools, our own boards. Gary had designed one, I had wired it all up, and we plugged it into the Apple, we ran it to an Atari video computer system, and we wrote code in 6502 in the Apple, downloaded into the little card that had 4K of RAM, and then the Atari ran that as a 4K EEPROM. It was an arduous task, not too bad. When we joined Activision, we had a larger system that was called a Blue Box that had wonderful breakpoints and single stepping and debugging tools that we could use. And we did work off of a PDP-11, which ironically was much slower than the little Apples we had, because at Activision we had 5 or 6 guys on this computer. And whenever you made a change to your game and assembled the code, inevitably everybody was kind of doing that, so the code was a bit slow at that point to develop.
And just so people have a handle on what assembly means and the EEPROM thing, basically you had to take your code and somehow put it onto a chip. Okay,
yes.
And so it's considered like a burning process. That's what they called it. And so you're basically writing code from a computer and you're placing it into a chip. Well, that process was slow and it didn't always work all the time, and it was a very hot procedure and it took time and that sort of thing. So that's the way you used to create these games,
yes.
Right?
Correct.
Kind of arduous, time consuming. Now, flash forward, so this is Keystone Kelly is in 2020, and so
yes.
You've got some new tools to use. Can you talk about the new tools that you're using? Because when you made this new game, you could not be using the Blue Box of yesterday.
No, I could not. In essence, what I'm using today is a simple editor on the PC, a text editor, that I'm writing the code in, and then I am assembling it on the PC using any number of tools that are out there to assemble 6502 assembly language programming code. And then I use this wonderful tool that everyone, I'm sure, knows about if they play the 2600, called Stella. And I can run the code instantly in Stella on my screen without having to burn EEPROMs or plug it into an Atari. And it just is a marvelous thing that I can do very quickly to see if the code I changed worked properly.
And so you're talking about the debugging process. You're actually able to do it quickly so you can figure out what went wrong. You're testing it for any kind of issues. You're just making sure that the whole game is fit for packaging, because you can't do updates. Once you've burn something. Nowadays you buy a pinball machine, it's like version 003. It's like it's not even version 1 yet. You're still in beta for another year before it's. But you guys had the pressure of doing that, and now you're making a game right now where you can go through that much faster. So you're able to create these games and create this game using modern technology. And how much faster? How much faster is it now?
Well, I would say that I could write a whole game and do it in about 1/3 less time.
Okay.
So certainly the tools today to be able to turn around and see how the code works is much faster and much better, much more efficient than we had back in the 80s.
Which is great, because I lived sort of that, and I know what you guys went through. I originally wanted to be a programmer for a video game, so I totally get what you did. And what language were you were writing assembly? Is that correct?
Yes, 6502 assembly language. And a lot of the games these days that are done homebrew-wise use some of the extra things that Atari offers. I think it's called Atari Basic, or they use some of the different chips that you can now manufacture for the cartridges. For instance, in 84, David Crane came out with Pitfall 2, which used a special chip called the DPC chip. And today, some people are using that chip to help enhance the number of things you can do on the screen. It basically gives the Atari a turbo lift and lets you do some extra things to it. While I'm writing the game in 6502, I'm writing it exactly as I did at Activision in 1983. I'm not using any additional hardware, no additional RAM or software, and I'm writing it just like I would have done back then to make a ROM and then manufacture it.
Now, so we're fast forward to the year 2020, and so I wanted to show this off again because you not only came out with a game, because this is considered homebrew, okay? Back in the day, it was just what you did for a living. Now you're actually doing this as a homebrew. So there's a whole new revival out there of making the old new again. And so people are either redoing some of the old games to make them the way they should have been in the first place, or they're coming out with some original games. And so now this game started off a long time ago. There's a big story behind this game, and let's just start about where did you get the concept of the game, and why are you doing it in the Wild West? I have nothing wrong with the Wild West. I love the Wild West. Gives you all the possibilities, but why set it then? Because we're in 2020. Why wouldn't you put them in a spaceship or something like that?
Well, I had, as I mentioned earlier, I began the game after I finished Trackbots. And I had the train display up because I really liked Chopper Command that Bob Whitehead had done. And I loved the look of the desert, the look of the mountains. And so I wanted to use that as a basis for my next game.
Well, and I want to interrupt you. I think that's just an excuse to use the background. Okay, so you can have this sunset sort of thing going. You guys were sort of known for that.
It's an excuse to use the Activision rainbow that we used to call it.
Exactly.
It had to be in every game.
Yes. And by the way, I love trains. Any geek loves a train. So that's my excuse. And I want you to see what the trains used to look like back then.
Yes.
I mean, it was one big, long train. You had some cargo. You had a caboose. You had some cars to carry things, but this is the Old West. This is the way that everything happened. Actually, we're going back to trains. Everything's sort of going back to trains for traveling. Look at that. If that doesn't look like what you have going on your new game, right?
Correct. So I had begun this game and had some cars on the screen and had some things in it. And then I put Keystone Kelly in there, because Gary suggested, why don't you use Keystone Kelly in the game? And then all of a sudden, the 1983 video game crash happened. And so no one wanted to buy video games. They were all buying their games at Toys R Us or KB Toys for $2, $3, $4. And Activision pulled us off of the Atari 2600 and put us onto the Commodore 64 to write games for that. So I made a copy of this little game, put it in a cartridge, burned the ROM, brought it home, and lost it. So fast forward to 2018.
No, you can't blame you can't be blamed for this, okay? And I'll tell you why, okay?
All right.
It's not our responsibility for our keys or for our wallets or for our video games, okay? Because men just can't hold on to anything, okay?
Butterfingers just wasn't there.
Oops.
And what's that?
Oops.
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 So, oops, I lost the cartridge. No, I really did. And funny thing is, the gentlemen who run the National Video Game Museum are good friends of mine, and Gary's and my brother and Dave.
Yeah, throw around names much?
You get John Hardy, wonderful man. I would, and Sean Kelly, I would tell them about this game throughout the years and said, I had this Keystone Capers 2 cartridge, and they would all be excited to see it, but I told them I don't have it anymore. I can't find it. So after about 22 years of telling them this, they kind of looked at me and said, we think you're full of crap. Well, in 2018, while going through storage with my significant other, she was digging through some boxes and pulled something out and said, oh, what's this? And I said, oh my goodness, that's my lost Keystone Capers 2 cartridge. And I happened to call John Hardy, who was happened to be in Long Island at the time. He lives in Texas. He drove over the next day. We plugged it in, turned it on, and up came Keystone Kelly on top of a train again.
How did that make you feel? I mean, was there excitement? Was surprise? Was it just the fact that it still worked?
All of it. I didn't think I would ever find it again. And I was surprised to see what it looked like. The funny thing is, about 6 months before that, my brother had turned me on to a website that allowed you to program the Atari on a browser. What you're seeing there is actually the original version from 1983. And I used this tool in a browser to recreate from memory what this cartridge looked like from 1983. And when I found the cartridge and plugged it in, I compared the two, the one I had been working on for 6 months and the one that I found in the cartridge form. And actually the one from the cartridge form, the one that I had worked on for 6 months looked better than the older version, which you see there on the screen.
Okay,
so that's the original thing I did in the lab at Activision in 1983, what you're playing there on the screen.
So this is 30 years in the making. So this is actual footage, and now you've got the cartridge. You said where did it go?
I actually donated it to the National Video Game Museum,
which is located where?
It's located in Texas. I would have to look up the exact city. Okay. Right outside of Dallas.
Okay.
And they were very gracious to take it and put it in as part of their archives. And so when I did this, I realized, as you had mentioned, that there's quite a homebrew field for people creating new 2600 games. I didn't really know this existed until I found the cartridge and started telling people about it.
In fact, if you were to want to play Atari 2600, and this is a 30-year-old system, why do you want to play a 2600? Because the games are challenging, new things are coming out, retro is totally in and hot. Plus, you can actually buy, I think, a Retrocon 77 with an HDMI connected to it, so using your new cartridges. So they still make brand new Ataris, if you will, and they're making brand new Atari cartridges, if you will. So
yes, it's actually the Retron 77, which is a wonderful HDMI system that plugs into your current flat TV and allows you to play the old 2600 cartridges. So let me just mention I believe the museum is in Frisco, Texas. Okay. I believe that the National Video Game Museum is.
Just want to give
them. I realized there was this market to sell or to play our old Atari 2600 games, and a market for people to want to buy new ones that were being done by people in their homes. And I decided that I would then take the game I started in 1983 and finally finish it after all these years and release it as a brand new cartridge.
And this is what a Retrocon looks like for everybody, so you can see.
Yes, it's a wonderful system. Allows you to have HDMI output on any Atari cartridge, and works wonderfully.
And there's the cart. You actually stick in the cartridge right there. It's no different. Right. And you can actually, if you don't like their joysticks, you can buy your own original joysticks and put it in there, which is really nice. So
right.
So yeah, it's kind of all coming together for you right now.
It is. I mean, not only am I going to finish the game, but people can now actually still play it on an old 2600 or a brand new one that they purchase.
Which the nostalgia just goes off the charts at this point in time. So
yes. What I need to do is I need to roll out the little cart that we used to have the 13-inch Montgomery Ward color TV on, split the channel 3, and then plug the cartridge in and turn it on and see the little noise pattern on the screen as you sit there and play it.
Yeah, I've actually seen some people recently that they like to set up their home like that with the old, either the console TVs or the little ones where on the bottom you've got the Atari, on the top you've got the 13-inch TV. And actually, a lot of people played in black and white back then too. So they did, and you still can if you want. The switch is still there. So
just turn down the color all the way.
Yeah, turn down the color all the way. So we're in the year, again, I'm saying 2020 because there's a lot that's happening for you. So you've made this game, and it's not coming out yet. It's going to be coming out around the holiday time. Is that right?
Yes, I'm nearly finished with the game, and I'm actually going to launch a Kickstarter to help fund the manufacturing process. But I put that off a few months because I know a lot of people are cash strapped at this time with the COVID issues and the unemployment issues.
Yeah.
Game will be coming out as a cartridge in box around holiday time this year. Mm-hmm. It actually isn't called Keystone Capers 2 anymore, or because I don't have the rights to Keystone Capers. Those are still at Activision. I don't have the right to the character. Those are still at Activision. So the train is now being run by Keystone Kelly's cousin from the old country, Casey O'Kelly.
Well, Irish have big families, so
he
it takes a village to make a video game.
Right. And so you have Casey O'Kelly on the train, and now the game is called Gold Rush because you are rushing around getting gold that has been scattered along the train. And once you collect all the gold, you go up to the gold car, you put it in, the train slows down and stops, and then you get to the next level, which is a completely different train.
And so I'm showing some photos here of the game itself.
Yes, those are some photos. And as you see, I've taken some liberty, and I'm not using all of the standard Old West box cars. I've got some kind of new funky cars in there as well to add to the playability.
Now, I believe I've got some exclusive footage. Is that right? Am I the only one to have this footage?
This is some exclusive footage minus the audio that is still being worked on.
Okay.
You'll see some of the cars here, and some of the enemies that I put into the game. There you go. It starts at the back caboose, as you see, and you can go into the cars now. So I'm going in the caboose. There's a little potbelly stove. And now I'm going to be wandering along, and here's the first thing we come across is some cow skulls, and then we have some large hairy tarantulas from the desert.
Now, so you have a thing about if anybody knows your game Crackpots, it's not the first time you've made some spiders. So
that is correct. And now here we have a little snake basket. This guy appears every now and then, and you've got to kind of jump over him. He comes out to scare you, and now we have some other creatures. There's a dragonfly. Now this is nice. This is kind of the twister that comes across the desert. Mm-hmm. And you've got to watch this guy and be able to avoid him. And then once you get past him, this is kind of like a desert owl that comes. This is some pipe cars you can run through. These are some flat cars with packaging and gondola cars. And I think we're coming up now to the coach car. And you can go into the coach car and the dining car. Oh, there's a pipe car. Now we're on the coach car. We can go inside, see the seats, grab a bar of gold there, wander back up, and we have to avoid the vulture that's coming across. And I will also be pulling some circus cars, as you see here. We have giraffes, we have these elephant tusks, or elephant noses, tusks that are hanging out. We've got some cars there that are tanker cars that you've got to avoid. I've got probably close to 50 or 60 enemies in the game. Here we have some more of the tarantulas on top of one of the stock cars. And once you collect all of these gold bars and wander across the train, you have to go into what's right there, which is the gold car. And you'll see once you climb down in there, you see all the gold bars. You drop off the one that you collected, and then you come back up, you race to the engine, and that'll put you in the driver's seat there. The game slows down, the engine stops. You'll be rewarded with the amount of time you have left, and now you'll start again with another train. And so I'm going to have about 50 or so trains levels in the game that you can solve.
Okay. I like it. And I'm not just saying it because I'm making this video with you. I like it. I like the fact that you can go down and up, so you're avoiding things on different levels. So you have things like flying at you. You can either go over them or go below. Also, the fact you can actually go inside, because I didn't understand when I saw the video at first that you sent me, the fact that you go inside, then everything goes dark. It's like, oh, you're inside. Nothing else matters. That's now your world.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, I wanted to. I had toyed a lot with, well, if you go inside a train car, does it fill up the entire screen? But I thought for good continuity, for instance, like if you jumped right inside the caboose, you'll see that everything else blacks out, and now you're just focused on the little caboose area where you are. And there are many cars you can go into, and they're also set up so they can be many cars length. So I can jump into a car and then run to the right or left 3 or 4 screen lengths of car while I'm inside one, and then come back up and go back to the top surface, much like Dave Crane did with Pitfall, with the area underneath that had the scorpions.
Which I love the fact you have so many different rooms and so many. It sounds like a game that you tried your best, so you're not going to get tired of it. And you've used a lot of your experience in the past, going, look, I want playability, and so.
Correct.
You've had a lot more time than you would normally have. What would you have normally had as far as time goes to make one of these games, and how much would it have cost in the past?
Well, at Activision, we usually got a game done in about 6 to 7, maybe 8 months. And the real challenge there was not only the time, but the size of the ROM. Inevitably, when I wrote Crackpots, it was a 4K game. But when I was finished with the game, it was about 4.5K. Mm-hmm. And so I had to take about a month of time and trim the code so it still worked the same, but it fit in 4K instead of 4.5K.
Yeah.
Today, ROM is not an issue. ROMs are very, very cheap, especially ones like that. So I can add all I want. And where Crackpots was 4K in one 4K bank of memory, Gold Rush is actually going to be 32 4K banks of memory. So it's Crackpots times 32. And I can continue to fit a lot of things in there and take all the time I want to make it really playable.
So this is the best you got. Now, you're not just doing Atari games. You're also doing all sorts of games. And you own a company called Tiki Interactive. And I looked at your website and some of the things that you do. Really, you can do all the code in the world, but without having the artistic backing, the things that make it nice to look at, or even some of the games that you're doing like we're hiding things sort of game. What are they called? Hidden object games?
Yes.
My wife's favorite, by the way. Okay, and because they can find the keys. We all know the wife can find the keys. They can find the wallet.
Find the keys. They find the keys.
Yes, and so, some really cool stuff that you're doing over there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. So I've been in the game business since the late 1970s, never left it, and in the last 5 or 6 years, I focused on my development company, Tiki Interactive, which is a B2B company. We create games either for companies that are published, or sometimes we create games that we publish ourselves. And this is a company where I have a studio that's based overseas, and we create a lot of artwork for different companies like Zynga and Pocket Gems, Pixelberry, and we also create games for various clients like the Home Depot, GAF, Hellman's Mayonnaise. And so this company, my company, does a lot of games that are either branded games or that are games that help teach people skills.
So it's for learning purposes. I'm just showing off a few things. You can go to his website and check it all out at Tiki Interactive. And here's an example of one of your, I think, Hellman games.
Yeah, we actually created this for Hellman's Mayonnaise a couple of years ago so they could run it on their Instagram. And they wanted a game that looked like it was done in the 1980s. So we chose a pixel style. And then they simply wanted a game where you could catch eggs that were falling into a Hellman's Mayonnaise jar. And if you successfully completed each level, as you'll see coming up, they rewarded you with a recipe on how to use Hellman's Mayonnaise in something. And so we did this for them as kind of a branded advertising game that ran on Instagram.
I use Hellman's exclusively as often as possible, so it just tastes better. I'm sorry.
So I'm sure it's a wonderful product. I do not care for mayonnaise, but I was very happy to do the game for them.
Now let's get back to the game one more time, because you're packaging it in the original style of. I'm going to pull this back up again. There we go. There we go. It's in the original style, so you're making it very similar to the Activision box, but
yeah.
So we know that what it looks like on the outside, but what does the inside look like? Are you receiving any of the pamphlets, any of the extra, things that go along with it? Because you used to have like tips and tricks and that sort of thing in the past. Are you doing the same thing like you did before, really making it retro that way?
Yes, I am. I was Activision was a wonderful time in my career. And I wanted to create this game and create other Atari 2600 games after this that really captured the feel and the essence of what we lived through in the 80s with our Activision games. So I wanted to recreate the look, so all of my games will have the retro, Activision 1980s box look. It will come with a manual. It'll come with a game poster. And then you'll be able to purchase either through the website or through the Kickstarter campaign that I do. You'll be able to get a set of collectible trading cards for the game. You'll be able to get a set of collectible newspapers. If you go to my site, dankitchengames.com, you'll see that I do a few Old West newspapers from the Gold Rush era, and those little newspapers that look like the old ones from the Old West. They give clues and hints to the game.
Are you talking about these right here?
Yeah, very good. So there's one. So my Gold Rush Gazette is there, and there I talk about the locomotive, and I begin to talk about some of the other levels that are in the game.
Now, I want you to know that next to it is an actual Gazette. So you guys can see he's not fooling around. He's making it as closely as possible. You didn't know I was going to put this side by side.
I did not know that.
But here we go. We've got a side by side next to the. So if you sign up on his page and you get the updates, this is the form you're going to receive it in. He's not fooling around. He is fooling around, and it's a really great time. But yeah, vintage collectible newspapers right there. And all you need to do is subscribe to the mailing list, and it's really easy to subscribe. I mean, you just click on the button, and you put in your email address, and you subscribe now, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. See, thanks for subscribing.
Thank you so much for subscribing, Scott.
You're welcome. How nice to get such immediate feedback. I appreciate that.
You get a live video of me thanking you.
Yeah. Hey, guys. I want all the people who bullied me about playing so many video games when I was younger. Look
Yes.
at me now. I'm just
Look
saying.
at me now, right?
Yes, look at me now. So I didn't really get bullied. I was too big, but
That's okay.
you guys get it. So you also were famous for doing the patches too, and so I think I've got some Let me see what I have here. Oh yeah, you've redone some of the original artwork, and so this is your patch. How do you get this patch?
You will get the patch by reaching the high score to join the Golden Spike Club. And the high score is still actually being tweaked based upon how I'm finishing the game and how I'm making it playable. So there'll be a plateau you'll need to reach, just like we had at Activision in the 80s, where you send me a photograph of it and I'll send you a patch to show that you have achieved that high score.
Okay, so hello, you want to talk retro? You're not only receiving a retro game, you're also doing a retro thing, which is vying. You're trying to get the high score. Now, you just need to hit that score, right? Like, you're going to hand out more than one of these. You're not making one of these made out of gold, right?
No. Anyone who reaches the score plateau to get into the Golden Spike Club will receive a patch in the mail.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. So, and you also have these trading cards. Can you tell me a little bit about the trading cards?
Yes, in the past couple of years, as I've done different game shows and game conferences, I started to release these trading cards at each one of these conferences. And this is a line of trading cards that will highlight all the characters and all the enemies in the game. So you'll see there is Casey O'Kelly, our famous Tarantula is the second one. Some of the cars that the train will be pulling, besides circus cars and box cars, there's also a whole number of magic cars. Back in the 1920s and the late 1900s, magicians would travel the country and bring their entire show in train cars to the next city. And so I've got a lot of train cars that are going to be magic cars, and there you see some of the enemies from that particular part of the game. And these collectible cards will be sold as a set that you can get through the Kickstarter, or you can buy them separately once the game is completed.
So people who are collecting things, now they have something brand new to collect. You don't have everything anymore. You don't. You have to now get Dan's stuff. So Dan's the man with the plan that you need.
Swag.
Yeah.
Yes.
So make sure to subscribe to his page. Forget about me. Subscribe to him on his page, okay? Because he's going to be able to show you. You'll be able to get your retro on, okay? And you guys know that's all you want in life. You know, and also avoid your wife anytime you make those weird purchases.
And if you can't find the keys, go to your wife. Well, you know that. Keys, wife.
It's all about the wife at the end of the day. I love my wife. She keeps me in line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'd be in the poorhouse. I'd be buying video games left and right. And I mean, I've been selling things left and right during this coronavirus sort of thing. So, I've got way too much. That's all I'm saying.
You can always buy another train or video game, I have learned in life.
There you go. Always. Well, Dan, I don't think we have too much more to go over today. I think we basically hit all the topics. So now we met at Free Play Florida, and so are you going to be hitting events, and can you be seen? Can they shake your hand? Can they get the old cards signed, their video game signed by you?
Absolutely. I was set to go to a number of conferences this year, but obviously with the current pandemic, many of them, if not all of them, have been temporarily put off until next year.
Yes.
So hopefully when the world opens up and we're able to fly and go to various conferences, yes, you can find me at a number of them. I'll post them on my website in the events section, and you'll be able to find where I am. And please feel free to bring your games with you that I've worked on. I'll be happy to sign them. And I'm sure at the next show I will have cartridges of Gold Rush to sell. And I'll probably have some sneak screens of my next game that will be coming after that.
So very, very cool. I want to put this back because this is the funniest, one of the funniest things I've ever seen right here. I love that photo. So
I love it.
you were
Thank
so
you.
totally game at that time. And when I took that photo, I actually asked you, I'm like, you need to look scared.
Yes. Well, I was envisioning these crocodiles just reaching up to me, ready to tear my flesh off.
Yes.
And I went right into character.
You did, and you went for it. So, and I appreciate that. It's the company you worked for, but you did not make this cartridge, but you were all, and this is your life. Activision is your life. I just had to show that one more time. So,
Yeah. And this is definitely an homage to David Crane, who arguably did one of the most wonderful games on the system ever. And Pitfall is just timeless, as we all know.
yes. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on. Don't go anywhere, guys. We're going to continue on with the show, but we're going to end the recording. So don't go anywhere. The live is going to continue. So.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So that does it for this episode of PlanetScott.TV. Thank you very much. We will see you. Make sure to follow us on... There we go. Follow me on Facebook.com/PlanetScott.TV, YouTube.com/PlanetScott.TV, Instagram. And I just want to thank you very much for coming on. We'll see you next week at 9 o'clock on Saturday. See you then.